Marvel and DC have been out for around a century now almost, with DC coming out in 1934 and Marvel coming out in 1939. Although Marvel's having a success right now in pop culture, it seems like DC is having a step back, as is having trouble keeping its actors out of current trouble. It's got me thinking, why don't Marvel characters have a readily exploitable weakness like their DC counterparts? And if you watch any of our YouTube shorts or TikToks, then you probably know that this question has actually gained a lot of steam, and this just made me want to cover what makes Marvel different from DC. Okay, so let's start with the obvious egg in the room, that being DC. As you can tell, it's been embedded into our culture that majority of the DC peoples have a readily exploitable weakness. You know, Superman's kryptonite, or Green Lantern's lantern ring being underpowered at times. Also, even more funnier, that Green Lantern has a weakness to the color yellow. Batman's literal humanity, or Wonder Woman's phased out weakness being tied up by a man. A little problematic now. And although these weaknesses have almost defined these characters for so long, some people think that this is an excuse for lazy writing. Why would you give such powerful beings like Superman, Martian Manhunter, Aquaman, or even Green Lantern such small and almost meaningless power debuffs? Carry a self-destruct button on your superpower like Dr. Doofenshmirtz has one on his innators. I myself and many other people would argue that having such a power debuff on these powerful characters from a writing perspective may make them a little bit more interesting and serves as a balance for their power. For example, Superman is a godlike being. He comes down and he can basically conquer any foe that comes his way, unless they are simply too powerful for him. So from a storyteller's perspective, you might want to have some check and balances on your character. Now then, what happens when a weaker character comes into play? How are they supposed to face their foe and give the hero a challenge? It wouldn't be much of a fight. Superman would be able to hear them. They would be able to find them. He would be able to basically stop the crime before it even happens. Then of course, Superman might be a played out example, but you have characters like Hal Jordan. And Hal Jordan also has a overt weakness, being that he either has to recharge his ring or he has to face the color yellow. And if you know a little bit about the power of the Green Lantern, is that his will dictates how strong his power is and can shape what the ring does. Basically, his power is the extent of his will. So what would be a drawback to his will? That it needs to recharge, and that the Yellow Lantern Corps is his arch nemesis, which also plays directly into the concept that fear is the direct opposite of willpower. If you are scared, you have very little will. You have very little desire to continue on. So it only makes sense from a story writer's perspective. DC having these drawbacks for their godlike characters allows them to have humane moments, or to humanize them and make them question their beliefs. And if I was to take it a step further, DC characters embody a certain moral that they will not cross, and that is essential to their character. And with these characters embodying these truths, it allows their weaknesses to challenge their actual beliefs and the lines that they will or will not cross, which is something that Marvel characters do not inherently do, which allows me to talk about why Marvel is different from DC. Most Marvel characters do not have a readily exploitable weakness. If you think of Spider-Man, it doesn't come to mind. If you think of characters like Hulk, Captain America, Iron Man, Black Widow, Hawkeye, these characters do not have readily exploitable weaknesses that you can just throw into their face and they will become weak or less powerful than they are before. And I know some people have also argued that some of these characters embody humanity just like Batman. And while that may be true, I'm talking about the mass majority of these Marvel heroes, these readily exploitable weaknesses do not exist like that. Now then, in the past, some of these characters used to have readily exploitable weaknesses, like Thor couldn't be away from his hammer for more than 60 seconds, and Hulk used to only transform into Hulk at nighttime. Now then, obviously this is kind of an inconvenience more than it is a exploitable weakness for these characters. And some people would argue generally that Marvel characters do not need a weakness to be entertaining, and that is true. And although exploitable weaknesses like red suns, recharging rings, or even just being plain human in a world full of supers is somewhat interesting at times, Marvel has proved that it does not need exploitable weaknesses to be interesting. Instead, they rely on character flaws, which I believe plays into Marvel's trope of a god trying to be human. What's the difference between humans trying to be gods, just like in DC, and gods trying to become human like in Marvel? Although in DC these characters already have godlike powers, they are tasked with upholding a certain moral value that they will not cross, whether that is upholding the standard of a kingdom or being truthful in every way. Whereas in Marvel, a lot of these characters do not care to uphold certain values. They just want to live life and do right by themselves. Which probably goes into a whole nother philosophical conversation about existentialism and utilitarianism and a couple different other concepts, which we're not going to touch on today. But Marvel has proved that they do not need to have exploitable weaknesses to A, make their characters more interesting, and to B, challenge the characters morally. Instead, they do this through overt character flaws. Now, what's the difference between a character flaw like kryptonite and a character flaw like PTSD? Although PTSD, alcoholism, and many plethora of problems like that are very serious, they are not the same as having an overt weakness like kryptonite. Things like kryptonite allow an external force to come in and shake up the morality of the character rather than an internal struggle like majority Marvel characters, which plays into Marvel's favor of having these characters with internal conflicts and battling those while battling external conflicts. Whoa. You said that Marvel characters do not have a weakness. Well, to clarify, I mean an external force that is specific to their power set. For example, kryptonite. Now then, these internal character flaws can really impact a character's judgment. For example, in the MCU, Tony Stark deals with the fault that he made in previous movies, and this leads him to make mistakes like creating Ultron and even abandoning his friends at certain points. You have other characters like Spider-Man, who lives day to day trying to protect those that he loves while trying to balance his life as a young teen or a young adult in the comics. Now then, the weakness of the mind versus the weakness of the external play very different in storytelling tropes. For example, if you took away Spider-Man's powers, he'd still be a teen dealing with internal problems like living his life day to day. And for example, like She-Hulk, if she didn't have any of her powers, she'd still be a woman who is struggling to gain respect within her office. These are internal conflicts and internal problems that do not play into their powers, so much that their powers play into their person. That is why the trope for Marvel is gods trying to become human rather than DC humans trying to become gods. And I think that is the difference between DC and Marvel's storytelling structure. So what do you think? Do you think Marvel characters should have overt weaknesses like their DC counterparts? Or maybe that DC is just having lazy writing problems and they need to get their act together and be more like Marvel? Let us know down below, what do you think about DC and Marvel overall? Who's your favorite character and which one should probably get more spotlight than a lot of the others? Make sure to hit that like button, and of course, if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you can get notified of our next and newer videos. Remember, this is your host, The Dedicated Artist, and this is Courage Media Group. Peace out.
That's on me, that's on God. Gotta go ahead and get another job. That's on me, that's on God. Got a sister something in my chop. That's on him, that's on God. Gonna make another way, I promise. That's on him, that's on God.